Imagine this. You're lying next to someone you once couldn't stop thinking about. Their phone lights up. Yours does too. You both glance. You both look away. The room is quiet, but not peaceful. It's the kind of quiet filled with invisible calculations. How much did I give today? How much did they give back? Am I still getting what I need? Are they? No one says these things out loud. They don't need to. They're already running in the background, like a silent spreadsheet tracking affection, effort, attention, sacrifice. And then a thought appears, soft, dangerous, hard to shake. Is this love? Or is this just a deal we're both trying not to break? We like to believe modern love is freer than ever. No forced marriages, no rigid roles, no staying just because. We choose each other now, voluntarily, rationally, on our own terms. So why does it feel so fragile? Why does love collapse the moment effort feels uneven? Why do people talk about relationships the way they talk about jobs, emotional labor, boundaries, value, return on investment? Why does commitment feel less like devotion and more like a conditional contract? Here's the paradox no one wants to sit with. We have more freedom in love than any generation before us, yet we trust it less than ever. You're encouraged to ask, is this meeting my needs? Am I settling? Is this still good for me? These questions sound healthy, responsible, self-respecting. But stay with them long enough and something shifts. What happens to love when it's constantly audited? When every gesture is measured? When every flaw is weighed? When affection has to justify itself to survive? You might tell yourself this is maturity, that you've learned from past wounds, that you're just being realistic now. But look closer. How often do you hold back, not because you don't feel deeply, but because you're afraid of giving more than you'll receive? How often do you keep part of yourself in reserve, just in case this relationship stops making sense? You say you want connection, but you negotiate it like a transaction. Maybe that's not your fault. Maybe you learned, slowly, quietly, that unconditional love is dangerous, that giving too much leads to loss, that vulnerability without guarantees is naive. So you adapt. You love carefully, strategically, with escape routes. You don't fall. You calculate the risk of falling. And yet something feels missing. Intensity fades faster now. Mystery evaporates. Love feels thinner, more replaceable. You can always swipe, upgrade, move on. So why does loneliness feel so persistent? Why do people who are constantly choosing better still feel emotionally underfed? Here's the question most people avoid. If love becomes a mutual transaction, what happens when one of you stops being profitable? When you're tired, when you're struggling, when you're no longer exciting, efficient, or emotionally convenient? Is love still love when it depends on performance? Or has it quietly become something else? We don't talk about this openly because it threatens a comforting story, that modern love is more enlightened, more fair, more rational. But what if it's also more brittle? What if the very logic that protects you from heartbreak is the same logic that prevents intimacy? What if, in trying not to be used, you've turned love into a marketplace, where everyone is buyer, seller, and product at the same time? And if that's true, this isn't just about dating. It's about how you see yourself, how you assign worth, how you decide what's safe to give and what must be withheld. Because once love becomes transactional, you don't just evaluate others. You start evaluating yourself, your attractiveness, your usefulness,
your emotional return. Slowly, love stops being a place you rest. It becomes something you manage. To understand how this happened, you have to stop looking at relationships and start looking inward. This didn't begin with dating apps. It didn't begin with social media. It didn't even begin with modern culture. It began the moment love stopped feeling safe. Most people aren't afraid of being alone. They're afraid of being expendable. As children, many of us learned, without words, that affection follows behavior. Approval comes when you perform, comply, succeed, please. Withdrawal comes when you disappoint or resist. So you learn that connection is something you earn. You adapt. You become attentive, useful, emotionally perceptive. You learn to read the room, to give the right amount, but not too much, to hide parts of yourself that might cost you love. This isn't manipulation, it's survival. And survival strategies don't disappear with age. They mature. In adult relationships, the same logic returns, dressed up as wisdom. Will they stay if I keep adding value? Will this work as long as we both benefit?
Value now means many things. Emotional support, stability, attraction, growth, security. You're no longer simply loved. You're assessed, and you assess in return. When vulnerability once led to pain, the nervous system learns to demand control. So love becomes structured, negotiated, bounded. You don't surrender, you exchange. Layer culture on top of this. Modern life worships autonomy. Dependence is framed as weakness. Needing too much is labeled unhealthy. So love must not threaten your independence. It should add to your life, but never destabilize it. Support you, but never consume you. Fulfill you, but never demand sacrifice you didn't agree to in advance. This sounds reasonable, even wise. But notice what disappears. Risk, mystery, the willingness to be undone by another person. Love becomes a project to manage, not a force that transforms. In older ways of seeing the world, love was something larger than the self, something you entered, not optimized. Now it must align with your goals, protect your identity, justify its existence. And once love is expected to serve the self, it must prove its usefulness. Every relationship becomes conditional. I'll stay as long as this continues to work. This doesn't make you cold. It makes you anxious. Transactions require balance, so you track effort, compare investment, monitor fairness, not because you're selfish, but because you're afraid of being the one who gives more and loses. So you guard yourself. You delay commitment. You ration affection. You keep one foot out the door, not to leave, but to feel safe. And safety slowly suffocates intimacy. Because intimacy requires moments of imbalance, moments where love isn't equal, efficient, or fair. A transactional mindset can handle partnership. It struggles with devotion. And culture reinforces this every day. Know your worth. Don't lose yourself. Walk away if your needs aren't met. Important ideas until they become armor. You protect yourself so well that nothing truly enters. You avoid being used by never fully giving. And then come the consequences. They don't look like breakups. They look like stability. Two people together, sharing routines, splitting responsibilities, saying the right things. Everything functions, but love feels managed. You're not unhappy, but you're not deeply alive, because your mind stays in evaluation mode. Who initiated last time?
Who apologized more? Who's giving more right now? Quiet calculations, constant vigilance. Love stops feeling like rest. It feels like maintenance. And maintenance never ends. So even closeness carries tension. Compliments are weighed, gifts interpreted, arguments analyzed for meaning. You lose the ability to experience love without interpreting it. Another consequence follows. When love is conditional, you start fearing becoming unlovable. If the relationship depends on value, value must be maintained. So you manage yourself. You edit your emotions, suppress inconvenient needs. Try not to be too much. You optimize yourself for acceptance. And the more you do this, the less seen you feel. Because what's being loved isn't fully you. It's the version that performs well. So even affection comes with doubt. Would they still choose me if I stopped trying? That doubt often becomes numbness, restlessness, the urge to keep options open, which leads to replaceability. When alternatives are always visible, commitment weakens. You stay, but partially, and partial presence accumulates. Relationships feel provisional, temporary until proven otherwise. This doesn't just affect romance, it reshapes society. Trust declines. Vulnerability becomes rare. Loneliness spreads, even among couples. People together, but emotionally alone. Then comes the deepest consequence. You apply the same logic inward. You don't just evaluate others, you evaluate yourself.
Am I still desirable? Still valuable? Still worth choosing? Your worth becomes relational currency. So when love ends, the loss isn't just emotional, it's existential. You rush to replace it, to restore balance, to prove you're still wanted. And the cycle continues. Transactional love was meant to protect you from pain. Instead, it produces a quieter suffering, a low-grade emptiness, a sense that something essential is missing. You tell yourself this is adulthood, that passion fades, that this is just how it is. But ask yourself honestly, have you become safer or smaller? This is where rebellion begins, not by leaving, by unlearning. Unlearning the belief that love must be negotiated to be safe. Unlearning the reflex to protect yourself before you feel. Unlearning the idea that vulnerability is weakness. The rebellion isn't against your partner. It's against the voice that keeps score. Don't give more than you get. Wait and see. Protect yourself. That voice feels smart, but it keeps love shallow. So you begin choosing presence over leverage. Instead of asking, "Is this fair?" you ask, "Is this true?" You stop giving to secure outcomes. You start giving because it's honest. This doesn't mean abandoning boundaries. It means redefining them. Boundaries aren't walls, they're clarity. You give what you can freely. You stop what would breed resentment. And something shifts. Your actions stop being strategic. They become real. You say what you feel because it's alive in you. You risk being seen because being unseen costs more. Yes, it's dangerous. You can give and still be left. You can open and not be met. But here's the truth. That risk is the point. Love only becomes meaningful where guarantees end. Not because it's reckless, but because it's real. You stop threatening withdrawal. You stay present in conflict. You repair to reconnect, not to rebalance power. Sometimes this reveals incompatibility, and that's not failure, that's honesty. Transactional love keeps incompatible relationships alive through negotiation. Real love allows them to end cleanly. You stop interpreting endings as proof of unworthiness. Love is no longer evidence of your value. Its loss doesn't erase you. You stop shrinking to stay chosen. Stop performing to remain lovable. You become grounded, not controlling outcomes, but remaining yourself regardless of them. And something unexpected happens. Love regains its gravity. It feels dangerous again, but also alive. You feel more, not because you're attached to results, but because you're present for experience. Presence cannot be optimized. It cannot be measured. It can only be lived. And this leads to the final truth. Love is not meant to protect you. It's meant to reveal you. Transactional love asks, "Am I safe?" Real love asks, "Am I honest?" You were taught to love reasonably, to preserve autonomy, to give carefully. But transformation requires risk. Love becomes real when it can no longer be guaranteed, not as a strategy, but as a choice. You stop asking what this gives you. You ask who you are when you love. Are you present or guarded? Honest or strategic? Alive or safe? Love isn't measured by how long it lasts, but by how fully you show up while it exists. A relationship that ends in truth may be more real than one that survives through management. When love is no longer proof of your worth, you stop clinging. You love, and let reality be what it is. That isn't detachment, it's freedom. Freedom from fear dictating depth. You allow love to be intense without being eternal, connection without ownership, devotion without erasure. Love becomes rare again, sacred again, because you stop diluting it with calculation. You stop loving in installments. Stop keeping emotional receipts. You risk misunderstanding. You risk loss. You risk depth. Not recklessly, but honestly. So is modern love just a mutual transaction? It can be, but it doesn't have to be. Transactions arise when fear leads. Love begins when courage does. Not the courage to give endlessly, but the courage to give truthfully. Not to stay forever, but to stay fully. You don't fall in love to be safe. You fall in love to be alive. Alive enough to feel deeply. Alive enough to risk loss. Alive enough to let another person matter without control. You may lose relationships this way, but you won't lose yourself. And that may be the only kind of love that was ever worth choosing.